Hello everyone. This week we are studying the nonprofit and result-driven strategic management. So today I'm going to briefly explain three rules. So nonprofit sector. What is nonprofit organization? We need to think about the basic concept. So compared to for-profit organization, usually it is widely acknowledged that nonprofit sectors are very attractive and trustworthy contracting partners because they are assumed to hold altruistic core values. So public sector and non-profit sector usually tend to be described as equal partners as well as stewards who share common interest within the realm of government contracting process, according to the contracting literature. So usually for-profit contractors' performance is not easily observed and measured compared to other sectors. So usually non-profit contractors are less monitored than other sectors. So historically, for-profit sector has been regarded as mission-driven organization because they are most of them actively engaged in social and health work, human services to help some people, mainly socially vulnerable people in practice, the poor, children, and homeless, something like that. So they have very unique legal environment. As you may know well, they are 3013 tax exemption organizations, so they usually seeking for government funding or they're looking for volunteers to help their program. So they are very unique faith-based incentives organizations, so they may act as sometimes aggressive political forces to lobby to secure their government funding for their program. This is a little bit negative perspective of non-profit sector. So this kind of environment of non-profit sector, they usually, regarded that they lack financial incentives to guide organizational leadership, and they tend to prioritize responsibility to more limited community groups rather than the public interest underlining equal access to services. So sometimes they may be poorly managed, but sometimes because they have some, motivated by using their network or political ties to get more funds from governments. But the thing is, non-profit sector can usually, known as, mission driven and socially conscious in nature. So they are a little bit trustworthy contracting partners. And also, I already mentioned that their tasks are too complex to define. So that might be, top topic in public sector and public administration literature. So there are still ongoing debate in the literature. Non-profit sector can be trustworthy partners of government or opportunistic agent. There are two main, different, you know, concept about non-profit sector in the literature. And given this kind of the basic aspect of non-profit sector, Alexander's article deal with the adaptive strategies of non-profit human service organization in the current era. So the background, he mentioned that the current environment change is significant because their impact on profit sector, because non-profit sector has been struggling with lack of financial resources, government funding mainly, and their lack of deal with their accountability when they are involved in the government contract, and they are also struggling with because high heavily driven competition to get more government funding, foundation, corporation, and individual donor support. So as you may know well, in 1970s and 80s, new public management came to the United States. So there are very basic concepts representing new public management, efficiency ground. So the competition and improved organizational performance have been paid attention, and also management by the private sector, private or quasi market, and private oriented techniques has been paid attention. So they started to get more attention for need for change toward efficiency, economy, and effectiveness. So over time, new leaders like entrepreneur leaders is required to get, change and to more strategies in the long term. So focus is that more than 200 non-profit human service organizations serving children and youth in Cuyahoga County in Ohio. So the purpose of this study is to identify adaptation strategies organizations found effective for the current environment. So it reviews the result of longitudinal focus group interviews, and they reviewed the final workshop directed to analyzing strategies for maintaining organization viability. So that's the main background indicated in this article. So the author mentioned that some basic adaptation theory. First one is life cycle theory. So usually in the literature of organizational theory, organizational adaptation and survival has been addressed in terms of organizational stage in its lifestyle, its ability to manage adaptation, and its skill in gardening or gaining resources, something like that. So as I already mentioned that in the case of public organization, non-profit sector may pursue multiple objectives and reimbursements from clients, and governments and organizational stakeholders can hold diverse expectations. And also, like private sector, non-profit sector may also serve the needs of that, specific population. So they must generate resources stream in order to survive themselves. So according to the life cycle theory, for survival, for non-profit sector need to exercise some degree of control over resources flow, and that stability will thus ensure. So such survival is rooted not only in developing competence, but also in the process of creating and maintaining support for their objective, maybe their program, and in the broader way of intergovernmental environment. So that's the main concept. To get survive, they need more money and they need more resources, something like that. So organizational adaptation strategies, they have two different theories. First one is institutionalism, adaptation to dominant norm and conformity to professional standard operating procedure and other rules, kind of the fiscal or organization institution may be important to proceed. So the other one is you may know well, I already mentioned in the previous lectures, resource dependence theory. This is the famous theory mentioned that organizations' goals should evolve and also they sometimes can be displaced through a dynamic process of interaction with the environment for resource acquisition and survival. So when we think about contracting or networking or public-private partnership, that concept are related to resource-dependent theory. Because this theory imagines a free market environment in which organizations are rational entities competing for resources. So some scholars mention that they can define the effectiveness of an organization in terms of its bargaining position as reflected in the ability of the organization or ability to use its environment in the acquisition of scarce and limited or valued resources. So like institutionalism, resource-dependent theories believe that organizational goal can evolve, or change depending or in responding to environmental change. So the main idea underlying these three different type of theories that to get survived and to more money and resources, the non-profit sector should change their mission and or they can use their network using their political or personal ties, or they can think about new rules and procedure to manage more effectively over their program. So method is the series of non-union for-profit, interview, forum, and workshop. Again, renewable analysis of this study is social service non-profit organization were randomly selected from a database in this county in Ohio. And basically, the author mentioned the three different types of organization embedded in non-profit sector. The first one is traditional established organization. They usually have, for example, American Red Cross, Easter Seals, YMCA, or Salvation Army, traditionally to help, vulnerable people. The second organization is about community-based organization. They include neighbor centers like social action organization, providing a broad variety of services open to immediate local level. And third organization is about faith-based organization that are provided a variety of community services and emergency services as well. So they include, for example, food banks, homeless shelters, and child welfare services, and something like that. So they consider these three type of, organization for the analysis. So according to the analysis, they found some adaptation strategies in the nonprofit sector. So first one is a little bit short term. I'm sorry. The first one is that the nonprofit sector need to pursue strategic expansion. So they need to think about, nonprofit survival. Of course, they should rely on, reputation for reliability and accountability to clients, to resource providers. They need to keep to provide, their own strategy a little bit broader. And second strategy can be, they need to develop business management techniques because new public management came to the United States, so they may think about new technology, email, internet, or information. They might be crucial to create a learner organization, right? And also, third one, they can need to step up boundary spanning activities. They can use their network using their interaction with clients, staff, and board members who bring resources to the organization in terms of funding, skilled networks, and political ties. So maybe inter-organizational ties can be one of the options. And so focus group participants in this study repeatedly made reference to the resources they were able to garner through linkages, network, grant, contracting, contracts, donated professional services, or media attention and referred clients, or ability to shape policy. So some providers argue that business practices can actually enhance the service delivery process, making more costly and difficult to measure progress. So maybe they can think about the formation of new network or links as a constant means of bringing new resources and opportunity to the organization. Then first one, they need to maintain public service character through commercialization. That can be also related to the second one, using business management techniques, because the usually revenue generating program or expanded client base can provide the organization with autonomy necessary to develop program and services needed by low paying clients. So in best of circumstances, as the organization becomes more business oriented, it will move from crisis management, just caring for one financial crisis to another, to a more deliberate and proactive course of action. So a degree of financial interdependence that generated by commercialization can afford more control over goals and organizational services directed to low-paying clients. So instead of long-term sacrifice of the organizational political public character, maybe business-like strategies, businessification, could allow the organization more autonomy, something like that. But sometimes they have some critics about these parts. So the conclusion, in 1980s, during the new public management period, most of the organization, including nonprofit sector, they have been struggling with financial pressure. So at that time, they need to consider cut their program, or more rely on volunteers prepaid, or they more rely on assessing more realistically the cost of various programs, or they try to stretch its current revenue to accomplish as much as feasible. So the author mentioned that the nonprofit sector should consider inter-organizational network as a one strategy of reducing environmental uncertainty, or as well as securing their resources. So maybe smaller community-based and faith-based organizations begin to recognize the need to work with and through the large ones, in order to get more resources. So they need to think about more effective adaptation strategies. Maybe they can use networking, or they can think about the new strategic expansion of services and client bases, or they can think about some increases used of business technique, benchmarking, or best practices from private sector, or they can use some new technology to generate outcome as well as to manage effectiveness of their program. And next, Moore's article I already mentioned in week 2, so I'm going to very briefly review the detail. Organization strategies, we need to think about one main question like this: how the organization will operate to create value and sustain itself in the immediate future. So the author mentioned that in for-profit sector, for-profit organization, the form of financial targets, how a company plan to compete in various product and service market is important question. And on the other hand, in non-profit and governmental organization, particular activities and specific mission may be important in favor of public interest sometimes, or public in favor of the limited vulnerable people like the poor, homeless, unemployed people. So strategy should be feasible, of course, and value creating and sustainable. So they need to think about their challenges and opportunities of the environment in which it is operating. So of course there are some basic difference across the sector like this. Among 3 different sectors, of course there are different sources and revenues and different groups, clients like that. And also they have different measurement of their performance, or they need to think about different level of strategy for success or survival like this. I'm sure you can read by yourself and you can record the week 2's lecture. So defining the mission is important for profit and non-profit sector. So mission can be defined as the value of the organization used in judging past performance and assessing future courses of action. So they need to think about more substantive and invisible factor rather than financial or visible one. So they already mentioned that they may think about networking, communication, interaction, and feedback, or more evaluation based on qualitative value rather than just quantitative numbered one. So this kind of invisible, relational factor may be one of the options for non-profit sector as their future strategies to survive. Also, importantly, we need to think about, they need to keep, create, and protect public values in changing, adopting their mission in response to the changing environment. So public value keep is very important. And also this is the framework comparing for-profit sector with public sector. There are 3 different main factors are interacted each other. In terms of the public sector, you can think about financial performance, organized survival. Sometimes they can be contracted each other. But the thing is, social values and public values is not necessarily aligned with either financial performance or organization survival. This is very obvious because the public sector, their main goal is to meet the demands of citizens or people or communities. So their mission should be based on the public interest, which is the main difference between public sector and private or for-profit sector. So strategy in public sector, I already mentioned that the institutionalization, legitimacy, and managerial support from top leaders is important, and also they need to raise their self, think about the organizational capacity. So they need to train their people, staff, and they need to think about, training by taking class, or making some study group themselves. And also they can think about their network using their interaction with outsider like for profit or non-profit, or think about benchmarking from private sector, of course. So they need to change their capacity to raise in the long term. And also, of course, their activities and their efforts should be harmonized with the social values. So that's the main concept to make their strategies in the public and non-profit sector. The last article mentioned that also about non-profit management. The author mentioned that the non-NGO management is important because currently today many NGOs compete for increasing scarce donor resources. This is the main challenge. So, but the thing is, NGO management is a relatively new concept in the literature. So both private and institutional donor demands greater financial accountability and more concrete evidence of program impact. Small independent NGOs find it hard to keep pace with more efficient. Larger ones can take advantage of economy of scale in marketing, operations, and support services, of course. So in confronting this paradox, NGO managers may face two issues like this. How to transform organization effectively to strengthen, enhance their organizational performance, and how to balance tools from other sectors that may allow them to improve organizational performance within an organizational culture that is strongly suspicious of both private and public sector techniques and motivations. So given these two basic questions, this study focused on the use of private and public sector management improvement framework at CARE, which is one of the largest U.S. international relief and development nonprofit organizations. So they focus on this organization's global transformation strategies. So the management framework and tools used in CARE's management transformation strategies are grouped into two different categories. First one is micro-level strategic framework and tools. So the author mentioned the framework of organizational repositioning driven by two main scholars, Moore's and Porter's framework. And then the long-term organization-wide strategic planning also one of the option, and re-engineering, which is the new concept and drawn from private sector, which is the one framework or tool non-profit sector think about. And the second one is specialized strategic implementation and adjustment tools. So again, program benchmarking is one of the options under this concept, and custom service improvement, which is the main concept of specialized strategies. So the case of CARE during this time, 1992 to 1997, CARE deployed three macro strategic frameworks to help set major new organizational directions. I already mentioned the Moore and Porter's framework and the long-term strategic planning and re-engineering. So CARE continued its relief activities and expanded its development works to include family planning and micro-enterprise lending. So their mission was changed like this: to affirm the dignity and worth of individuals and families in some of poorest communities of the world. So their transformation efforts begin in the program division. So in 1992, specifically, the division developed its own 3-year transformation plan, which included seminars to look at future development trends in program benchmarking and best practice initiatives and program redesign and management training, something like that. And by 1995, CARE USA senior management took its transformation effort organization-wide. So they engage more in global strategic planning process. So more specifically, they focus more on integral program to improve the household livelihood security of families during times of natural disaster, humanitarian emergency, rehabilitation, and more stable economic social development. So they are more engaged in globalized strategies. And next is framework of organizational repositioning. I already mentioned that for this, the author mentioned that two concepts, Moore's framework and Porter's one. I'm sure the Moore's framework already related to the previous article, Moore's. So mission and mandate, institutional is the main concept to change their strategies, and they also need to raise their internal capacity themselves. They can train their people, or they can think about their network in political and personal ties, and also external support from citizens or iron triangle may be effective as one of the options or aspect of strategic framework. But on the other hand, Porter's framework is a little bit different. But Porter's comparative forces framework was used during CARE's planning process to help senior management understand CARE's move from the preeminent, highly focused, low-cost refugee relief organization distributing CARE's packages to its new role as a multi-service relief and development organization with higher cost and a danger of being caught in the middle with neither competitive cost nor highly distinctive services. So which means again they needed to think about new roles as a multi-service relief and high cost level. So when you look at this, they need to think about new stakeholders, suppliers, and competitors, and consumers, and substitute also new entrances. And also during the time of managing multi-level services, they should think about higher cost because because the current situation is more complex and uncertainty. So this is the main framework for strategies of nonprofit sector and the prime ranking for potential NGO use. I already mentioned that macro level strategic framework and tools are effective. Moore's one, also Porter's one, but the thing is long-term strategy planning is the importance because they mentioned that focus group mentioned that this is high stability. But specialized strategy implementation and adjustment tools among these, look at this participative approach. Participation, collaboration, networking might be important, right? And also client service feedback using survey questions or, mayor management assessments, county offices. Also, maybe we can think about networking or interaction to receive more feedback, their comment or satisfaction may be important to get survive or, manage effectively as a strategy. So recommendation, the framework recommend some good point for nonprofit sector. Nonprofit should think about some blending strategies framework to accommodate the increasing competitive NGO environment. So according to the Porter, they need to think of a combined competitive market analysis with this model Moore's social value. Of course, they need to pay attention and they need to grow themselves, their internal capacity to get survived. And also they need to get more support from external stakeholders. And also, they also need to find organizing principle other than one of the profitability or public value. Of course, they need to keep focus on, seeking social goods and social values. And they also need to identify new ways to listen to captive service recipient, which means they need to receive more feedback from their clients and citizens to foster their success of their program. Also, they need to carefully consider the value orientations and motivation of nonprofit staff members, the empowerments and motivation and incentives inside the organization might be important. And also they need to think of a balance concerning efficiency with accountability, maybe including humanities and decency or their basic mission of nonprofit sector. And so this is the main concept of this week's. So discussion question, you may recall the vanishing volunteers case. So extending the case, the new case may be related to the week 11 and week 12, this week's lecture. So please read yourself the case titled The Case of the Crummy Contract. So based on what we covered in last week and this week's, what you can suggest some recommendation for new director. So think about like this way. Prepare some points of information about the current situation that she needs to consider and think about the question in your minds by yourself. What should she strive to achieve in the organization and processes for contracting in the department? What conditions, arrangements, and policies and procedures should she definitely try to establish? Or what could other level of government and authority to support her management of organization in the context of privatization and contracting out? And considering the importance of public-private partnership, we already covered last week, and accountability mechanism, make your own suggestion for her organization. Thank you.